Story versus plot. What in the world is the difference? I'm writing a short, I plan to direct it. How important is this really? Well, if you want to be able to make simple films that can pack a big punch, then you should probably understand this stuff. If you feel a little confused, you're not alone. When I first started filmmaking over a decade ago, it confused me too. And no, they are not the same thing. Yep, Darius Britt here, and welcome to part 3 of how to write a short film. What is the difference between story and plot? If you were to Google the difference right now, you're gonna find a gaggle of different arguments. And to further complicate things, they all seem to contradict each other. Fiction writing, academia, screenwriting, each of these fields, they seem to have their own distinctions, right? Like WTF, and why can't we just agree on this? I am on a mission to make this very simple for you, because you got plenty of other things to be doing with your life, like actually making films. Yummy? So let's go ahead and take the meat and leave the endoskeleton. See what I did there? Because it's usually take the meat and leave the bone. You know what I mean? You're right, I'll stop. For the purposes of narrative filmmaking, the following distinction is the one most people subscribe to, okay? So before anybody leaves me a comment saying, my teacher said, I know. Here's what you need to understand before we dive in. Story is what happens. Plot is how it happens. Story is defined as a narrative of events arranged in their time sequence, okay? Basically, this just means the chronological sequence of events, layman's terms. On the other hand, plot is also a narrative of events, but there's more emphasis placed on the causality between the events, or the cause and effect relationship between the events. If the events in your story or the scenes in your story don't cause other scenes to happen, then you don't have a plot, you just have a series of events. You can think of plot like dominoes. Each scene causes the next scene to happen, okay? If you're getting hung up, stick with me, it'll make sense, trust me. So this guy, E.M. Forrester, gave this famous example. The king died, and then the queen died. This is an example of a story. It's just a chronological order of events. But if you were to say the king died, and then the queen died of grief, now it's a plot, because we got a cause-effect relationship between the events, okay? You tracking? You ever had a friend tell you about a movie, and then the recap goes something like this? Yeah, man, it was crazy. Like this dude gets shot like 9 times in the car, right? And then there was this explosion, and then this chick named Valerie who was with this dude the whole time, she ended up stabbing dude in the back. And then we find out Shorty was working with the ops the whole time. They're not describing the story, they're describing the plot, okay? The plot points. He's just giving you the rundown, right? The logical progression of the events from beginning to end. Another name for this is the storyline, okay? It would make more sense if it were called the plot line, since it's the plot we're actually talking about, but I digress. When we talk about narrative film, the plot is the action of the story. And by action, I mean more than just car chases and explosions. It's the physical journey your character takes. It's the events that take place in the story. It's all about the how things happened. You can think of the plot as like the play-by-play in detail. Remember that friend that told you all of the things, right? He gave you the play-by-play. When we talk about plot, we're also talking about the structure of the story, okay? The exposition, inciting incident, rising action, all that stuff, right? Yada, yada. Those are all called plot structures. When someone says that a movie has no plot, what they usually mean is nothing happened. There was a lot of talking, but no action. The characters either literally weren't doing anything, or what they were doing seemed extraneous or unimportant to the story. An example of this would be most mumblecore movies. There really isn't much of a plot to these types of movies. It's just about people connecting most of the time. Just very talky movies. Hence the name mumblecore. On the other hand, story is all about the emotional value of the narrative. It's about the characters and the emotional journey, the meaning of the events that happen. When someone says that a movie has no story, what they usually mean is it has no emotional value. Nothing touches you. Nothing makes you care about what happens to any of the characters. This also includes lack of originality, because when we see stereotypical characters or cliched situations that we've already seen a million times before in other movies, we usually stop caring about what happens next, right? Because it's just cliche, it's not original. Here's another distinction for story. The story can usually be boiled down into 1 or 2 sentences, communicating the general theme, usually. Kind of like a logline. For example, you could say that the movie Terminator is a story about man versus machine, or it's a story about man battling obsolescence against its own creation. You could say Transformers is a story about a boy and his first car. That's relatable, right? Only his first car happens to be an alien. You could say E.T. is about a friendship between a boy and an alien. I think you're getting the idea. Steven Spielberg told the cast and the crew on the set of Schindler's List to remember that this is a story about a man who wants to make a difference, not about Nazi concentration camps. times. He boiled the story down into one sentence and communicated that with everyone to make sure that they were all making the same movie and they're all on the same page. Now, story and plot go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other, okay? Story gives meaning to plot and plot gives action to story. You can have the best idea for a story in the world, but without a plot to give it backbone, structure, and progression, it'll be a formless pile of mush that's gonna bore everyone to tears. But plot without story is meaningless. We've all seen those movies with loads of plotting, loads of action, a lot of stuff happens, but it all just kind of feels pointless. There's no greater meaning, you don't care about any of the characters, etc., etc. By the way, if you're new to making narrative short films and you'd like to be able to make lean, mean, shootable projects around your busy schedule, you should download my step-by-step guide for making simple films with the resources you've already got, okay? Link below. So let's take a look at a film as an example of these distinctions we've made here today. Let's take a look at Porcelain Unicorn. That sounds like a good one. We open with an older gentleman walking, cardboard box tucked under his arm. He seems to be looking for a house. When he gets to the door he's looking for, a flashback begins. Journeying into his childhood memories, we go back to wartime Germany circa 1943 as Nazi boys break into a house. They hear a noise from a nearby storage closet and one of the boys, our protagonist, goes to investigate. He stumbles upon a young Jewish girl hiding out in the storage closet. There's a clear conflict of interest here as he's a Hitler Youth and she's a young Jewish girl. This is the time of the Holocaust, etc., etc. She gives him a porcelain unicorn. It's a shared moment of humanity between the two. Nazi soldiers come busting through the door. The German youth covers the little girl so she can make her getaway. And then this happens.
Es tut mir leid.
It's cold-blooded, man. It's cold-blooded. Back to present, we now know who this older gentleman is. We also know whose house this is. He delivers to her the repaired unicorn, and it's an oh so powerful reunion. Powerful. Just powerful. Now, if that short didn't make you feel something, then you're the reason why there's evil in the world. Now, what we just went through is the plot for Porcelain Unicorn from beginning to end. It's everything that happened, including the cause-effect relationships, okay? It was the play-by-play in detail. Now let's talk about the story. This 3-minute, 6-line short film packs an emotional punch. Our protagonist is quite the character. We really get to see what he's made of. We see him confront his fears twice for a greater cause. He's a stand-up guy, very admirable. The 1 or 2 sentence boil down might look something like this. It's a story about a man trying to reconcile with a survivor for atrocities that were beyond his control. You could say that it's a story about the inherent goodness in the human condition despite the fact that we can be absolute monsters sometimes. Heck, you can even say that it's a story about how events in our youth can shape our adult lives. Now that you know the distinction, what are you supposed to do with this knowledge? Well, if you're writing a meaningful story with good characters, but you notice that things just seem to drag, right? Then you might need to add a little more plot to pick things up, pick up the pace, okay? Your story might need more action. If your script has tons of action with a great pace, but you notice that your audience just doesn't seem to care about the characters or what's happening to them, then you might need to slow things down and add a little more story, more emotional value, more meaning. It's a balancing act. If you got too much of one, you add the other. But one thing is for sure, if your audience is not interested in what happens, which is the story, then they're not going to care about how it happens, which is the plot. If you're writing a short film, you should also understand the basic plot structures. I walk you through everything you need to know about them here. Short films and features share similar plot structures, but there are differences in how they're used. If you want to make those kinds of films that can be simple but impactful, you're going to want to know this stuff, okay? See you over there.